Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to the very first session of Learn Flutter Together. This is a study group organized by Women Who Code where we sit down in Zoom on every Monday at 8:30 p.m. to discuss a few chapters on the Flutter Apprentice book. So if you haven't read the book, I have put the link in the event description. Also, when the recording is uploaded to YouTube, I will put in the video description as well. So let's get started. To give you a high-level overview of what we will be covering in the next few weeks. So here is the schedule that I just copy-pasted from Google, and we will follow the same flow. And then for this week, we will focus on the first two chapters, which is the Getting Started section of the book. This will cover on what is Flutter and what is Flutter not about. Also, it will go through and teach you how to build a simple app, just to give you a better idea of how a Flutter app would look like. Then next week, we will go to chapter 3 and 4, where we focus more on the widgets and so on. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Yong Shean. I am a Google developer expert in Dart and Flutter, and I'm also a full-time software engineer in commercial solutions. I have started using Flutter a few years ago. I think should be 2 to 3 years back, and so far I'm still enjoying the experience of using and learning Flutter, and also because of how easy it is to use to build beautiful UI, and it can provide a very good user experience for our app users. Yeah, so no regrets for starting my Flutter journey. And if you're interested to talk to me, we can connect on LinkedIn. Feel free to add me. And I also write a few blog posts on Flutter at Medium. And sometimes I will upload code examples or my pet projects to GitHub. If you are interested, feel free to check it out. Before we start, I would like to introduce who Women Who Code Kuala Lumpur is. Women Who Code is a non-profit organization which aims to inspire women to excel in technology careers. And our vision is to create a world where diverse women are being represented as technical executives, founders, board members, and software engineers. To date, we have more than 250,000 members worldwide, and in Kuala Lumpur, we have more than 1,400 members and still growing. We have organized more than 70 events last year and this year combined. These events include technical trainings, lightning talks, hackathons, career navigation, leadership development, study groups like this, and more. And our events are open to all genders unless specified. Also, I want to say a big thank you to our organizing team. Without them, we wouldn't have made these events possible. And finally, this is very important, the code of conduct. We want to provide an empowering experience for everyone, regardless of gender, identity, sexual orientation, age, religion, and so on. And if you receive any form of harassment, please let us know, and we will take it very seriously. For people who violate our code of conduct, we would ban them from our future events. So don't forget to follow us on Facebook. we have our Facebook page where we post contents and event updates so you don't miss an event. We also have a Twitter account, and we will upload the video recordings to the YouTube channel, so don't forget to subscribe. Now that we have gone through the introduction, we can dive right into the book. Now let's open up the page of the book. So if you go to this URL, you will find that this book is currently available for free for 3 months only. So grab this chance to read it while it's still available for free. And once you have signed up for the account, you can start reading. And then we will start from the very first chapter. And in this chapter, it's talking about what is Flutter. As you might have already known, Flutter is a software development toolkit from Google to build cross-platform apps. And it uses Dart as the programming language. So if you are coming from an object-oriented background such as Java or TypeScript, you might already find Dart familiar and easy to learn. Also, there is one neat feature provided by Dart, that is the hot reload feature. This means that once you have made changes in your code, it lets you update the changes quickly and then shows the result live on the emulator or your physical device. And there are more explanation on who Flutter is for. You might want to read up this part to check that if it's for you. And also, here are some of the great things about Flutter. First of all, Flutter is open source, so you can check out the code repo. And I think the license they use is BSD3 clause, so you can use that for commercial apps. And then we've already mentioned hot reload and hot restart. We will come to that difference later. Yes, and there's a lot of good things about Flutter. If you're not convinced, you can see that there are a lot of big tech companies who are already using Flutter to build their production apps, including Very Good Ventures and Tencent. And there are also some cases where you might consider not to use Flutter. For example, if you are building more complex 2D and 3D games, then you might be better off using a different library like Unity or Unreal. If you are just building a simple 2D game, I think there is one library called Flame, where you can use that to create 2D games in Flutter. Also, if your apps rely a lot on specific native SDK, then you might also want to consider using native Android or iOS development. And other platforms, if you are considering to build on this platform, then you might also want to hold your decision. And here it mentions that the support for web is still early, even though it's already in the stable release, but still for the web, the packages that is available are very limited. So if you are considering to build a web app in Flutter, you might want to check out the package repository and see if the packages that you want to use are already available. Also, here it presents the Flutter architecture. So there are a few components. There is the framework itself and also the plugins. These are the highest level. And going down, you have the engine that is in C++. And going down, you have the platform-specific codes. So if you are using something that is common, like camera or location access, these kind of things should already be provided by the Flutter team. They have written the platform-specific parts so that you can just use the high-level packages to implement them. And then here you can see a few layers from the highest level down to the lowest level. So these layers will enable you to do customization at any layer that you want. If your app has a material design language, then most likely you'll be able to stick with this layer where you make use of the widgets that are already pre-built and included in the Flutter library. Then you just import them in your file and use it. And going lower down, there is the widgets layer. So this is if, let's say, you want to customize certain built-in widgets, you can also do that. If you have custom design and branding, you might spend most of your time here in the widgets layer. Also, you can also go down further into the rendering layer and the foundation layer, where you can handle individual gestures and animation. Or sometimes maybe you want to build a drawing app, then you might want to make use of the foundation layer for the painting features. And here it lays down the sections of the book. So for today, we will focus on the introduction, the first section. We will learn some basics of the Dart language, but actually we will just get a high-level overview instead of diving into the details. And at the end of the section, you will be able to build a simple app with 2 screens, which we will see in a few minutes. And the rest of the chapter is setting up the SDK on your computer. So feel free to follow through the steps if you have not installed Flutter. Then finally, when you have installed everything, make sure to run Flutter Doctor to check that all the necessary components have been installed correctly. So if you get a check mark in everything, then that means you are ready to go. If not, here in the output, it will also tell you what are the steps you need to run to fix the issues. And then an IDE of your choice. So they recommend actually 3 editors. One is Android Studio, which is used by this book. Another is Visual Studio Code, which is my personal favorite, and Emacs. I haven't tried Emacs before, so can't give comment on that. And then here is some setting up your IDE. And wait, I think I scrolled past the part where you use Flutter Create to create the app. Oh yes, so you can also do this in Visual Studio Code when you already have the Flutter extension installed. Then you can go to the command palette and select Flutter New Project to generate a new Flutter project. So then here you can try out the hot reload with the generated project. And that's first chapter for you. So let's recap. What are the key points that we learned in this chapter is Flutter is a software development toolkit to build cross-platform apps. And with Flutter, you can build a high quality and performant app. And it's very flexible as well. You can customize the look and feel. It's also friendly for both new and experienced developers who wants to start a new mobile app. So when you have installed Flutter SDK, make sure to run the Flutter Doctor command to help you diagnose any issues related to the installation. So that's it for the first chapter. And up next, we will learn how to create a new app in Flutter. Okay, now you have gone through the introduction. We can finally start creating our first app in Flutter. So by the end of the second chapter, you should be able to build a recipe calculator app. And here in the book, it shows a screenshot of how the app would look like. And let's start. So how do we bootstrap our app? Luckily for us, we can use the Flutter create command and then followed by the name of the project to start. So I will open up a terminal. It's actually PowerShell on Windows, so let me just hide the book for a moment, and then we can type Flutter create recipes, and you can see there are a bunch of files that are just generated, and then it's already created in the recipes folder. So what we can do is we can change territory to inside the folder and then use Flutter run command to start up the app. But I think what I will do is I will open up the folder and check what is the structure first. So I will open it up with Visual Studio Code. And now let's move this here, trust the authors. So now what's inside the folder? So if you see here, we have quite a number of folders created. And then I think the main working folder that we'll be looking at is the lib folder. So inside the lib folder, we have one file called main.dart. And inside main.dart, you will see there's something happening here, which we will explain later. Now let's go back to the book. Okay, so it also opens up the project with the IDE. In this case, they are using Android Studio. So let's try to build and run the app just now. Let's go back to the Visual Studio Code. And then at the bottom here, I will see that I have 3 devices connected. I have emulator running, Android emulator, and there are also Chrome and web available. So it is up to you whether you want to run in Android or web, depending on your project need. So in my case, I will run on Pixel and then press run. So I think if you are setting it up for the first time, you might not see an Android emulator created, but you can always create one. I think you can do that in Android Studio. So let me pull in the emulator. Wait. So now you can already see the counter app that is fired up. And let me just make this bigger. Okay, so by default, it will also open up the widget inspector. This is a tool that is provided by the extension. I think I haven't talked about this. So if you want to set things up in your Visual Studio Code, you can go to the extensions. Here I have a few extensions installed. The most important ones are these two. You need to install the Dart and Flutter extensions in order to see the widget inspector on the right. Okay, now let's see what's on the Flutter app that is created. So here is a very simple counter display. The initial count is 0, and you can press on the floating button here. So on every tab, it will increment the counter value by 1. It's a very basic app. And then let's go back to the book and see what it talks about this. Okay, so the very first thing you can see in the generated code is it has a class, my app, that extends another class called stateless widget. So this is how you define a new class in Dart, and then you can extend upon an existing class. In this case, it's stateless widget. Stateless widget is a built-in class in the Flutter library. And here it says that almost everything that makes up the user interface is a widget, which is why you might have heard some people say that everything is a widget in Flutter. And the characteristics of a stateless widget is it doesn't change after you build it. I think the concept of stateless widget will be introduced further in this chapter. And then now we are preparing the app to build a recipe app. So we will want to rename the my app class to become recipe app. So let's do that. Switch back to the code. Let me close this and zoom in a bit. I would normally keep the debug console open just to see the log of the app while it's running. So in the book, we need to change the name of this class to recipe app. I will do that with a shortcut. It's F2 on my keyboard. Might be different on Mac, I'm not sure. So just rename this to recipe app and give it a save, and then you will see that the hot reload is running. Maybe I need to fix my emulator as well. So this is refreshed, nothing has changed, the state still remains. So this is a neat feature of hot reload. It actually maintains the state even when you have done some changes in your code. So now that we have renamed this, let's see what's next. Okay, next part is styling our app. So what do we need to change to customize the appearance? It seems like we have a theme that is defined, and this theme is a theme data object, and then we are putting this theme to the theme parameter of our material app. So looks like here we can override the primary and secondary color of the app. Okay, so here it mentions about the build method. So yes, so this is the build method, which serves as the entry point of the widget. So in this case, this is the recipe app widget, and the theme will determine the visual aspects like color. And when we instantiate a new theme data class, this will contain the defaults, the default as per defined in the standard material design. And then in this function we will return a material app widget, and then this is the title of the app, and we will put in the theme here. We use the copy with keyword to override certain attributes. So here we are changing the primary color to gray and secondary color to black. And let's see if we just make the changes and check what will happen to our app. So here I need to change a few things. Okay, we need to change the theme object to match what is in the book. So here I need to pass in a theme. Then here I need to declare the theme data, which we will use below. And now we have this, we can do the copy with. Copy with means that we are overriding some of the parameters inside our theme object. Then we can use a color scheme. Again, we copy the existing color scheme, but we override the primary and secondary color. Gray, secondary is black. I always add trailing commas so that it's easier to read. Finally, I need to remove the const constructor because it's no longer constant. Remove this. And here it says that I cannot hot reload. I need to do a hot restart. So I'll do that. I will hot restart. Let me bring back the emulator and hide this. Let's do a hot restart. And there you go. The app bar color is changed, and also the floating button is updated. So this is using the primary color and this is the secondary color. Can proceed to the next section. Okay, before we continue, we want to do some cleanup. So let's go back to the code and let's see what do we want to change. So in the book, it says that we should clean up the my homepage state class, which is this one, because currently it is showing the counter value, but in the app that we are going to build in this chapter, we are going to show the recipe. So we will remove some of this code. So this is not relevant anymore. And then let's see, we still want to retain the scaffold and then the app bar as well. Okay, and then we want to remove the whole body. Let's remove the body. Where is my center? Yes, so we will replace this with a safe area. We will come to that later. And then this safe area has a child of container. So right now I didn't put anything in the container, it's an empty one. Also, we want to remove the floating action button. This is not relevant anymore, so delete. Once we hit save, I don't know why this keeps happening. So once we hit save, you can see that our app is refreshed. Now we have nothing in the body, and we are ready to continue. Alright, go back to the book. So the first part is to build a recipe list. And before we start, we should create a data model first to contain the data structure of each recipe. So what we will do is, in our code, we will create a new Dart file in the lib folder called recipe.dart. And now we will define our class recipe. So what do we have in the recipe? We want to show the label, the name of the recipe, and then also the image of the food. So we will have a label that is of type string. We also have the image URL. So this is assuming that we are loading an image from the URL. Also, here we will need to define the constructor. So if you are totally new to Dart, this can serve as a good starting point to learn how the syntax works in Dart. So let's proceed. You can manually type this out, like this.label, this.image URL. But there is also a trick that I like to use in Visual Studio Code. I believe it's available in Android Studio as well. Is you press on this thing. Wait, I think because this doesn't have the final parameter, so it couldn't guess what I was trying to do. Then let's save this, and then here it will say you can create a constructor for the final fields. So if I press this, then it will auto-generate this code for me. So this is very helpful if you have a long list of parameters and you just don't want to type it out one by one. You can tap on the light bulb, and then you can tap on create constructor for final fields, and this constructor will be auto-generated for you. This is a trick that I personally like a lot. And there we have it. We have the recipe class that is created, so it's ready to be used. Now let's go back to the book. and we already defined the class. So next we need to supply some data. For now, we will create some sample data based on the recipe class that we have created. So since I am lazy, I will just copy this whole thing and go back to our code and paste this inside the recipe class. So this one is a static method in our class that returns a list of recipe objects. So the first positional parameter is the label of the recipe followed by the image URL. We will use this in the next part. So yes, we have already put in a hard-coded list of recipe, and it is a list of recipe object as defined here. Okay, let's skip through. Now we have here we are including the local path of the assets, as you can see here. These are the files that we want to include inside our project folder. And each of these JPEG files, we will put it inside the assets folder. This is the recommended way of the recommended place to put your assets. So now what we need to do is we go back to our code, and inside here we need to create a new folder called assets. Oops, sorry, it's not here. I should create it here in the root of the project folder. So now this folder is empty, but we will add in the images later. And then we still need to tell Flutter that we have the assets in this folder. Please include it in the project. But what we need to do is we go to the pubspec file, which is this one, and inside here you will see that there is a commented section of the assets. So what you can do is you can uncomment this, and there are a few ways to add the assets. One is you define one by one, as you can see in the example here. Or if you are like me, I just want to add everything inside the assets folder into the project. So I will do this. I will just include the whole folder. In this case, you can save a lot of typings, especially when you have a lot of images in the folder. Once you save it, your IDE will try to run Flutter pubget for you, and now all the files that you have put inside assets folder will be included in the project. Okay, now let's go back to the book and see what we need to do. Alright, now we should display the list. Okay, back to the code. In our main.dart, we need to import the class that we have just created. So what do you do in Dart files when you want to import something? You use the import statement followed by the path of the Dart file. In this case, it's recipe.dart. And once you save it, it will say this import is unused. So this is just getting ready for us to use the recipe class inside our code here later. And then next in my homepage state, which is this one, let's go to the save areas child. Here, what we need to do is we want to replace the empty container with a list view. So what list view do is it will render a list based on the item that you pass in. So list view dot builder, and it requires you to pass in the item builder. So what is inside our item builder? Item builder should take in a function of build context and an integer, and each like this function should return a widget. So let's define the function. So we have the context and the index, and what it should return is a widget. So the widget here will define each of the item in our list view. So what do we want to show in our list? Let's start with a simple one. We just return a text. So inside our text, we will pass in the sample data that we have created just now in the class recipe. So recipe.samples, this is how you access the static function of the class. And for each item, we want to get the indexed element, and we want to show the label of each sample. That's it. We can save this and see what's inside. Okay, actually here it will complain that the index value is invalid. This is because we haven't defined the item count. Oops, item count. So how many elements do we have? We have exactly the length of the samples. So since there was a breakpoint, so continue this, and you might want to restart it to see if the error is still there. And let's close that. So now you have a list that is showing the label of each sample. If you go back to our recipe class, this is exactly what it is written. So you have spaghetti and meatballs, tomato soup, grilled cheese, and so on. And very easily with the list view widget, you can generate a list of whatever you like. In this case, we started with the label of each recipe. Alright, let's go back to the book and see what we need to do next. So this is exactly what we did just now. We have a list view. We define the item count, and the length is the number of rows is the number of objects in our recipe samples. And we have the item builder that builds the widget tree for each row, and finally the text widget to show the label of each recipe. And then now we have exactly the same screen as the book. Very good. So next we want to build the card UI. What we want to do is instead of just showing a list of text, we want to show a list of cards. The card is a built-in widget that is available in material design. So if you are following material design language, you will find that it's very easy to build a Flutter app because they almost have every material widgets ready in the Flutter library. Then you can just use it. So in this case, we will use a card, and what will be contained inside the card is a column. So column is a layout widget. In the layout widget, we have two other widgets. One is an image widget, another one is a text widget. And now we can go back to our app and put in the card. So let's go back here in our main.dart. So we will create a new function in the state class. So here we can put in the new function widget build recipe card recipe, and then we can return the card. So inside the card you have a column, and inside the column you have a stack of widgets. So what is the first widget? We have an image widget. So this image parameter will take in an image provider, and asset image is extending on the image provider, so we can put it here. And then we put in the image URL inside the asset image. This will tell Flutter that, hey, I want to read the path of the image URL in my recipe object and display it in the image widget. Next, we have the text widget. So this is the same. We just want to show the label in the text, and press save. It will hot reload for me. And then right now the result is not showing yet because we haven't called this function inside the build method of our homepage state widget. So now we need to use the card. What we need to do is inside the build method, instead of the text, we want to return this recipe card widget. So we just replace this one with build recipe card, and this one will take in a recipe object. So since it's a list, we will take in the indexed sample, just like what we did just now, and hit save. Okay, now we have an error, and this is because the image complains that the image is not found because we haven't put in the image files inside our assets. So what we will do is actually, let me just download the sample image from the book. if you are not sure where to get the materials of the book, you can go to this repo, flta-materials in GitHub, and inside here you will find the source code that is shown in each chapter. And since we are in chapter 2, we will go to this folder and grab the assets. So let's see if I can just download this, or I can just clone this thing or download the whole zip. Let's download this just to be quick. Okay, now inside our materials, we just grab these files. Let's see if I can do this. And then paste in the project folder. Alright, if you look at the code, I have already put in the assets. So now let's do a hot restart. Or maybe I just stop this and start again. Easier that way. Let's launch it again and see if we can get the result properly. So there you have it. We have a list, and in each element you have a card. In each card you have an image and the text. Okay, let's close this and go back to the book. So now if you look at the widget tree, I think we can also open up the widget tree in our widget inspector. Let's go back to the code. So here you can see the widget tree of the whole app. At the very top level, you have the recipe app, which is, let me just hide this one moment. Which is the recipe app. And then inside the recipe app, you have material app here. And inside the material app, it contains a home widget, and this is pointing to my home page widget. And inside your my home page widget, it is a stateful widget that contains a scaffold. This scaffold has an app bar and also a save area as the body. And inside the save area, you have the list view. Then inside that, you have a card widget. Then inside that, you have a column widget, then followed by the image and text widget. So you can see the nesting of the widget in the widget tree here. Okay, now next we need to make it look better. So we now can customize the UI of the card. We can customize the look and feel by defining an elevation and give it a different shape. So let's go back to the code and see how we can do that. So I will close this for now. And then inside the build recipe card function, inside the card, if you hover over this, you can see what are the things that you can define for the card widget. So what we want to customize is the elevation and the shape. First, elevation will take in a double, and shape will have to take in a shape border object. So let's do the elevation part first. Elevation is 2.0, and shape, we can put in a rounded rectangle border. And inside the rounded rectangle border, we can define the side. If we don't define it, then it will use the default value, which is none. And we can also define the border radius. So what we want to do is we want to give it a border radius of circular. And here we can put in the radius in double, so 10. And then after that, we want to put some padding, because here you can see that everything is put in together in a very tight space. There is no space in between the card and the content at all. So what we want to do is we want to add some padding around here. So how do we do that is in our code, just before the column, we want to wrap the column with padding. So the easiest way to do this is you can put your cursor at column and then tap on the show code action button, which is a light bulb in Visual Studio Code. And then here there are many options. You can wrap with the most commonly used widget, or you can wrap with a custom widget. In this case, we just want to wrap with padding. So once I click that, then you will have a padding widget that is wrapping the column widget. And we want to change the default padding to 16. And once we hit save, you can already see that in our emulator there is some padding added between the card and the column. So what else? We can also add some space in between the image and the text. So we will do that. Below the image, we want to add some empty space. So this is what I like to do as well. I just add a size box with a height. So this one, let's give it a 14. We follow the book. Hit save, and it will be hot reloaded. You will see that there is extra space in between the image and the text. And finally, we can also customize the text. So what we can do here in our text, we will add the style. So this style, we will just use the text style object. And inside the text style, you can see you can customize quite a lot of things. You can change the color, background color, font size, spacing, and so on. So right now, maybe we want to make the font size bigger and use a different font weight and font family. You can do everything inside the text style. First, font size, set it to 20. Then give it a font weight of 700, and also define the font family to use Palatino. Okay, so now you can see that the font size has been increased. It is in bold and also it is using a different font. Alright. Now we can move on to the final section, which is to add the recipe detail. So I think at the end of the chapter, we want user to be able to tap on each item, each of the card in the list to view the recipe detail. Right now, if you tap on each of the card, it does nothing yet because we haven't added the recipe detail page yet. So now what we need to do is inside our my homepage state, we want to add a gesture detector. So what this gesture detector widget do is it will detect gestures, and what type of gesture that we want to detect. We want to detect a tap gesture. Then we can implement an on tap function inside the gesture detector. And after that, we have a navigator widget that will help us to navigate to the recipe detail page by pushing the new page into our navigation stack. So now let's go back to the code and implement it. So this is happening inside my home page state. So where we want to put the gesture detector, because we want to detect the gesture when user is tapping on the card. So naturally we want to wrap the card widget with the gesture detector. So this is what we will do. We will wrap this with a widget, and this widget is gesture detector. Save it. I think there is no change yet because we haven't defined the on tap handler. So always add the trailing comma so that you can see the widget tree easier. And inside our gesture detector, we will define the on tap function. So on tap, what we want to do inside the on tap is we will use the navigator dot push, and inside dot push, what we want to put in is first parameter is context, second is the route. So for the context, we will just pass in the context of this widget, and then for the route, we will use material page route, and inside material page route there is a builder. This will define the page that we will display later, which is the detail page. So again, this context is a function. Sorry, this builder is a function that takes in context, and it will return a widget. So what we want to return here, maybe we just return a simple text first before we build the detail page, just to test whether our navigation is working. Okay, here the linter is asking me to put a const keyword and tap save and go back to our app. Let's see what will happen when we tap on a card. Now it will show me a text with the detail page just as what we have defined in our material page builder. So looks like it's working. Let's go back. And let's go back to the book and see what we should do next. So here is just a bunch of explanation on what we did just now. And after we have make sure that the navigation is working, now we will create an actual target page. So what we will do is we will create a new Dart file called recipe detail page, and inside that we will define the recipe detail widget. So let's go back to the code, and inside the lib folder we can create a new file called recipe detail.dart, and inside here we will just copy and paste from the book to save some time. And then now there is some red squiggles. We can ignore this first. Let's see what the book says. Okay, now this is a stateful widget, and then this stateful widget will need to take in a recipe object so that it knows what details to display. And now we can create a recipe's detail state below here. I will again copy and paste from the book. So now the red squiggle is gone, and save first. So what do we have here? We have a build method, as you have seen in all the previous widgets, and what it returns is a scaffold widget. So in this scaffold widget we have the app bar that contains the recipe label as the title. Also inside the body of the scaffold we have a save area that contains a column widget, and we have the image and the recipe label. So once we have saved this, let's check it out in our app. Oops, I think I forgot to hook the new detail page widget in our main.dart. So let's go back here, and then instead of hard-coded text, we want to return the recipe detail page that we have just created. So recipe detail, and this is the samples. Now we pass in each sample to the recipe detail page. When user tap on it, it should push to that page. Now let's try it out. When I tap on this one, it will push me to a new page, and inside this new page I have the recipe label as the app bar title, and inside the body we have the image and the label. So it is working as expected. So now let's go back to the book. Okay, now we can see the screenshot. And next, we want to add some ingredients. Here in the recipe detail, we also want to show the ingredient list. So we need to create a new data model to contain the ingredient objects. So we will do that. Go back to the code. Inside here, we create a new file called ingredient. And inside this file, we will define the ingredient class. And what we need to have here is the quantity, the measurement, the name of the ingredient, and then we can auto-generate the constructor based on the final fields. Hit save. And then also in the book it says that we should put in the servings and the list of ingredients inside the recipe class. So inside here we will add a few new parameters. One is the servings. Another one is the list of ingredients. List of ingredients. This is what we have created just now. Ingredients. And then we need to include the new parameters inside the constructors. And now it will complain that this one is expecting 4 arguments, but we only have 2, because now we have added another 2 arguments. We might need to change the samples. So what I will do is I will copy and paste the new list of samples from the book. Let's replace this. And now we have more info. So here we have a list of recipe, and in each one we have the label as the first argument. Second is the image URL and the servings. Finally, we have the list of ingredients. So inside the list, in each ingredient we define the quantity, the unit of measurement, and also the name of the ingredient. Alright, looks like we have the sample data ready. And let's go back to the book and see what's next. So if we save and hot reload the app, there's no changes yet because we haven't put in the widget in our detail page. So what we need to do is going to the recipe detail.dart file, which is here, and then we need to put in an expanded widget. Okay, so what we need to do is, instead of showing this, we want to put in more information. So replace this part with an expanded widget. And expanded will need to take in a child. So inside the child we have a list view. And again, we are using the builder method. And inside the builder, we will pass in a few things. First of all, we need the item builder, as you have already seen in our card list. So it will take in context and index, and then we need to return a widget of each item. So what we need to return is a text widget. And let me just copy and paste we haven't defined the ingredient variable yet, so I will define it here. This ingredient will be from our recipe ingredients, and let's take in the index. Let's go back first, and we haven't done yet. We also need to define the count. Again, this is just the length of the ingredients list. And finally, we also want to add some padding in between each element of the list. So let's just give it 7 following the book. So once I hit save, let's wait. It hasn't refreshed yet. Oh, because I've hit a breakpoint here. And then we have an error. Why is that? Okay, we hit an error, and it's saying that now it's not a subtype of list of ingredient. Looks like it's saying that the ingredients is now. So the list of ingredients is now. I think this is because just now we have made some changes to the samples and it hasn't received the changes yet. So in this case, I'll normally just run a hot restart to make sure that it gets the latest changes from the app. And if it's taking longer than expected, you can always stop it and start again. I realize that this happens sometimes when I'm making a huge change, like converting a stateless to stateful widget. That will happen. Okay, now our app is back. We can tap on each one and see if it shows me the ingredients. So it looks like the first one is working, and so on. It shows me the ingredients and the detail page. Alright, now let's go back to the book and see the explanation for each of the new widget that we have put. So there's something new here that we encounter. This is an expanded widget. So what does this expanded widget do is it will try to expand the child of the expanded widget to take up as much space as is available on the screen. So you can imagine that if this is on a different device, it could be bigger or smaller. Then with the expanded widget, it's telling Flutter that, well, you can expand the content of the expanded widget to take up as much available space as possible. And then inside the expanded widget, you have a list view. So this view is just a scrollable list. And then inside each list view, you have a text object. Sorry, I should actually come to this screen first. So this is the expanded widget below here. And and inside this one is actually a list, just that now it's not scrollable because we have more than enough space to display. In the later part, you will be able to see that when we have more description, more content in this body, then you'll be able to scroll through. So next we want to add a serving slider. Now let's go back to the code and see where should we add the slider. Here we have a to do. We should add the slider here. So let's do that. Remove this to do. And then inside this slider, we need to pass in a few things. There are two required parameters. One is onChange, another one is value. So what I will do is I will put in the value. Okay, and this value should be a double. Maybe for now I will hardcode the value first. We will wait until we have created a variable to contain the value. And then onChange is a function that takes in double. So oops, and this is the new value. And what we will do is we want to call the setState function, and we will leave this empty because we want to see the result first. Oops, it throws an error and says that it doesn't meet the constraint. Looks like I also need to define a valid min and max value, because this value doesn't fit to the default value, the default min and max value of slider. So let's define it, min and max to be 1 and 10. And now give it a hot reload, and in our emulator we should see a slider below here. You can't slide the changes, you can't slide this around yet because we haven't put in the state in the value, so it's always fixed at 5. That's why you can see that it's somewhere in the middle. So now what we will do is we will introduce a state variable. What we want to put in the state is something that will change based on user interaction. So what will be changed? This value will be changed. So now in our code, we will introduce a new variable called slider value, and then we will put this inside the slider inside the state class. So let's initialize this to 1. Did I make a mistake? Oh, because this value needs to be a double, so I need to convert this to a double first. So to double, hit save. Now you can see that our slider value is at 1, which is the default value that we initialize here. And right now you still can't change the value yet because we haven't put in we haven't defined our onChange properly. So in our code, here we are calling setState. What we want to change here is the value of the slider. So we want to change the value of our slider value state, and this should take in the new value. Again, there will be an error because the types are not compatible. This is a double, but this is an integer. So what we can do is we can round this. When you call round, it will convert the double to an integer. Now when we hit save, and we can change the slider value. Neat. Now go back to the book. And then here, actually I forgot to define the active and inactive color. Right now we have gray color, so if you want to change the color of the slider, you can do that by overriding the default value of the color here. Active color, colors.green, and then give it an inactive color of black. So here you can see that the color of the slider has changed according to what we have defined. Now, what's next? Okay, now we have implemented the slider, we can update the recipe. So what we need to do here is let's go back to the code, and inside the expanded widget, here we want to take into consideration the value of the slider. So what would make sense is if we put in the slider value here, we hit save, then this slider will serve as the factor for each ingredient. So if we come back here, as we scroll around in the slider, you will see that this value has changed based on the slider value. So the further to the right, then the larger the value. Alright, looks like the value is reflected correctly. And this is a very powerful feature of Flutter, where you can define a state and then you can put in the state in any place that you like. In this case, we put inside the text widget, and after that, as the state changes, the value will be rebuilt based on the state. If there is no changes, it will not rebuild. So if we go to the other ingredient details, we can test this out and see if it also works. Yes, it works. Alright, let's go back to the book, and we have reached the end of chapter 2. So let's recap what we have learned. We have created a new app by running flutter create command. At first, this has generated a counter app, but after that, as we remove the code and put in our custom widget, we are able to create a Flutter recipe app. And we also make use of the composition to compose multiple widgets in order to control the look and feel of the screen. We can also define the styling using the widget parameters. Then we learned that the material app is a widget that specifies the app, and the scaffold app, it specifies the high-level structure of a given screen. And also we have learned how to use state to manage the state. And state is defined as any changing value in the app. It can be changed based on user interaction or based on an event. It could be an API call. So in this case, it's based on the user interaction. As user is using the slider to change the value, the state will change. And as the state updates, whatever widget that depends on the state will also get rebuilt. And you can make use of the hot reload and hot restart to check the changes on your device or emulator. And normally when the state changes, you will need to hot restart instead of hot reload. So if you can't remember when to use hot reload or hot restart, just try with hot reload first. If something doesn't work, then you can do a hot restart. So we have completed our very first app in Flutter. With just a few lines of code, we are able to build a recipe app that contains a scrollable list of cards, and you can even navigate by tapping on each of the card to see the detail screen, and you can also change the state as user interact with the slider. Very cool. So what's next is next week we will cover on the second section of the book, which will cover the third and fourth chapter. I think because this is a long chapter, we will split this section into two weeks. So next week we will do chapter 3 and 4, and the following week we will continue on to chapter 5 and 6. And in the next session we will learn more about widget. And once again, thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.